The latest. Thank you for your love and support. I appreciate you all. While the world were sitting down watching people having meetings, elite meeting in fancy hotel rooms, one man sits in his library watching the old world die. Former Greek finance minister Yanis Varoufakis just exposed what he calls the desperate bargain. It's a secret offer so bold it changes everything we thought we knew about the recent raids in Venezuela and the rising shadow of China. This isn't just about oil, and it's not about democracy. It's about a gangster style, quote and unquote, deal made behind closed doors to save a collapsing empire. Today we go inside the library to reveal the secret offer the US just made to China and why Venezuela was ultimate sacrifice. Varoufakis points out a haunting contrast. While the official story is being told by politicians in suits at the Double-Star Hotel Summit, the real story is being analyzed in the quiet of a study. He described a desperation that has set into the American psyche. The US is no longer the confident leader of the free world. It is now a wounded and make dangerous deals. Why Venezuela? Why now? Varoufakis explains that the US raid wasn't a show of strength. It was a panic move because for the first time in 80 years, the US dollar is facing a life or death threat.
I want to tell you something that happened last Tuesday at 3:47 a.m. Washington time, something that will never appear in the official State Department briefings, but something that reveals just how far the American empire has fallen. I was reviewing classified cable summaries when I noticed an unusual pattern. High-level Treasury officials were making unscheduled calls to Beijing, not through normal diplomatic channels, but through backdoor financial networks. The kind of calls you make when you're desperate. The kind of calls empires make when they're no longer empires. But let me start from the beginning, because what I'm about to tell you connects three dots that the mainstream media refuses to connect. The secret negotiations in Caracas, the panicked phone calls to Beijing, and the quiet liquidation of American hegemony happening right under our noses. You see, there's an old rule in international finance that I learned during my years as Greece's finance minister. When you're negotiating from a position of strength, you meet in marble halls with photographers present. When you're negotiating from desperation, you meet in hotel rooms at midnight with no witnesses. And right now, American officials are spending a lot of time in hotel rooms. The Venezuela story broke my heart because I've seen this movie before. In 2015, when I was fighting the Troika, I watched powerful institutions use economic warfare against smaller nations. But what's happening now is different. This time, the economic warfare has backfired spectacularly. Let me paint you the picture. For 5 years, Washington treated Nicolas Maduro like a cartoon villain. They froze his assets, seized his planes, put a bounty on his head like some Wild West fantasy. The goal was simple: collapse Venezuela's economy, install a puppet government, and secure control over the world's largest oil reserves. But here's what the brilliant strategists in Washington didn't calculate. When you sanction someone's oil, you don't just hurt them. You teach them to survive without you. And Venezuela learned that lesson perfectly. While American officials were giving speeches about democracy and human rights, Venezuelan oil kept flowing. To China, paid in yuan. To India, paid in rupees. To Turkey, paid in gold. They created the world's first post-dollar oil market, proving to every resource-rich nation that you can break free from the dollar system and survive. Now comes the humiliation. Those same American officials who called Maduro a dictator are quietly returning to Caracas. They're offering sanctions relief, they're issuing waivers to Chevron, they're essentially begging the man they tried to overthrow to please turn the pumps back on. Why? Because American refineries are choking. You see, Texas produces plenty of oil, but it's light sweet crude. The massive refinery infrastructure on the Gulf Coast was built decades ago to process heavy sour crude. Without Venezuelan heavy oil, these refineries can't produce enough diesel. And without diesel, the American supply chain stops. But if the Venezuela situation is embarrassing, what's happening with China is absolutely terrifying. While diplomats are begging for oil, the Treasury is begging for cash. And this is where our story gets truly bizarre. The United States needs to sell $3 trillion in new debt this year, just to keep functioning. $3 trillion. Let that number sink in. Scott Bessent, the new Treasury Secretary, wakes up every morning facing an impossible equation. He needs to find buyers for an astronomical amount of American debt. But his traditional customers are walking away. Japan, historically America's most reliable debt buyer, is in crisis. They're not buying American bonds, they're selling them to defend their own currency. Europe is stagnant, fighting recession. American banks are already stuffed with government paper, sitting on massive unrealized losses. There's only one buyer left with pockets deep enough to bail out the United States: China. The same China that American politicians spend their days threatening with tariffs and military confrontation. I have to pause here because the cognitive dissonance is staggering. By day, you have American generals talking about war in the Pacific. By night, you have Treasury officials calling Beijing, hat in hand, begging them not to sell their Treasury holdings. China currently holds roughly $780 billion in US debt. If they decided to liquidate even half of that position, American interest rates would explode overnight. The stock market, addicted to cheap money, would collapse. The housing market would freeze. The American economy would enter a death spiral. So while the headlines scream about getting tough with China, the reality behind closed doors is exactly the opposite. America is trapped in a financial dependency so profound that they cannot afford to truly confront their supposed enemy. This is what I call the debtor's paradox. You cannot declare war on your banker, you cannot sanction your creditor, you cannot threaten someone who holds the deed to your house. But here's the detail that keeps me awake at night. This isn't just about economics anymore. This is about the fundamental architecture of global power collapsing in real time. For 80 years, American hegemony rested on two pillars: the petrodollar system and the treasury bond market. Venezuela has just proven you can shatter the first pillar and thrive. China is proving that the second pillar was always an illusion. The petrodollar deal was elegant in its simplicity. America protects you militarily. You price your oil in dollars, forcing everyone to hold dollars to buy energy. But when you weaponize that system, when you use it for regime change and economic warfare, you destroy the trust that made it possible. The treasury bond market was even more crucial. The world central banks parked their reserves in American debt because it was supposed to be the safest asset on earth. But in 2022, when America froze Russian reserves overnight, they sent a message to every central banker on the planet: your supposedly safe assets are political weapons. The consequences are arriving faster than anyone anticipated. I'm watching bilateral trade agreements explode across the global south: Brazil selling soybeans to China for yuan, India buying Russian oil with rupees, Saudi Arabia accepting Chinese currency for energy sales. The BRICS expansion isn't just about creating an alternative club. It's about building alternative financial plumbing. They're constructing a parallel system that doesn't depend on American approval or American institutions. And the most beautiful irony, America is accelerating this process with every sanction, every threat, every attempt to weaponize economic interdependence. I've spent my career studying how empires die, and they never die from external conquest. They die from internal contradictions. They die when the cost of maintaining dominance exceeds the benefits of exercising it. They die when they become so desperate for resources that they have to negotiate with the very people they've spent years trying to destroy. That's exactly where America finds itself today, negotiating oil deals with Venezuela while calling Maduro a dictator, begging China to buy their debt while threatening China with economic warfare. This isn't strategy. This is the behavior of an empire in terminal decline, trying desperately to maintain privileges it no longer deserves and can no longer afford. The transition is already happening. While American politicians debate sanctions and tariffs, the world is quietly building a new economic order. An order based on mutual respect rather than unilateral dominance. An order where resources flow to those who need them, not those who threaten others. What I find most remarkable is how ordinary Americans are completely unaware of this drama unfolding. They see rising grocery prices, higher gas costs, but they don't connect these to their government's desperate diplomatic missions. They don't realize that every time they fill up their car, they're participating in Venezuela's revenge against American sanctions. I remember a conversation I had with a senior Federal Reserve official last month, off the record naturally. He told me something chilling. Yanis, we're not managing an economy anymore, we're managing a controlled demolition. Those were his exact words, a controlled demolition. But here's what keeps me up at night. What if the demolition isn't as controlled as they think? What if China decides to call America's bluff? What if Venezuela decides that even the new terms aren't good enough? What if the dominoes start falling faster than Washington can prop them up? I've watched currencies collapse, I've seen governments fall when their debt becomes unsustainable. But I've never seen a global reserve currency face this kind of existential pressure. When the dollar finally breaks, and it will break, the shockwaves will be unlike anything in modern history. The choice facing ordinary people everywhere is simple. You can cling to the mythology of American exceptionalism, or you can prepare for the reality of a multipolar world. Because whether American elites accept it or not, that world is already here. The desperate phone calls to Beijing will continue, the humiliating negotiations in Caracas will expand, and slowly, quietly, the dollar's grip on global commerce will continue to weaken until one day we wake up and realize the transition is complete. The question isn't whether American hegemony will end, The question is whether that ending will be graceful or catastrophic. And based on what I'm seeing in those hotel rooms at midnight, I'm not optimistic about grace.
Some analysts also said that the moment you see people taking some actions, trying to be, show up to the world that you should know that empire is no longer in existence. It's just that they are trying to do A, B, C, D so that people will still see that they are still in shape. Those who don't know, they'll follow them blindly, like with those in Africa who believe everything that these people say. And we believe that they are the giants of whatever. Just like when they decided that they were coming to Nigeria to save the Christians there. And then you see Africans, even our elites who were sitting on television calling this thing the best move to set whatever, as if when he came and did these things ended. You understand? So because we don't know much of what is happening in this world, we tend to follow the trend anyhow. And this man is exposing a whole lot of things to us. And that is why as Africans, we need to broaden our horizon. We don't have to limit ourselves to our immediate environment, because what we normally hear on this our news is nothing to let us know what is actually happening in the world. Like he said, these things that he's saying or exposing to us, they don't make headlines, because these people will make sure they control the information to the point that you and I will not get to know what is happening. The motive is for you not to know what is happening around you. Social media has come to help us, for us to know what is actually happening. Unlike those days where they control the narrative, they control everything. But this time around, social media is out there and they are not able to control a whole lot of things. It is left unto you and I to decide which information we want to feed ourselves. This will never be out. It will never make headlines. So sometimes you will listen to these kind of things and then you'll be asking yourself, but they didn't talk about it here. Because you are expecting to be hearing things from this and it will not happen. Why should they tell you that they are falling so that you look down upon them? Why would they let you know what is actually happening around them? And that's why sometimes when we even bring you information, a lot of people come to tell you that you are spreading misinformation. I've checked there, I've gone there. Because listening to this thing from somebody who speaks to power, the world listen. You still find people who will write under the comment section misinformation, because they believe that before you can hear anything, it should be on their traditional media houses. We don't know that these things are also part of the reason to which we are not getting anywhere, because they are using that to control us. That is why African youth, instead of us uniting and fighting for a better thing, we are rather fighting and protecting politicians. These are the same people that are making life for us. Yet, you find African youth very interested. You ask an African youth and the person will tell, I love politics. Oh, I understand politics. And the politics is my party within my country. And this is not how we love politics, and this is not what we call politics. You should know beyond what is happening in your country. This will shape everything of yours. And this is a very big expose to us all, for us to learn and know what we are walking into. And for us to have a different mindset when it comes to these people. Because Africans, we believe so much in these people. That is one thing that I sometimes try to understand, and then it's like the understanding is not coming. Yeah, we have been brainwashed, but this generation shouldn't be a generation of yesterday, because we are so fortunate that we have information on our fingertips. But we decide what we want to feed ourselves. Because you go to places and you can see that the African youth is so much interested in certain things that will not add anything. And when you finish feeding yourself with these things, you are the same person who will sit down and be calling for a good leadership. You want a change. Unemployment everywhere. Yet you don't want to even change your own mentality, which is the tool to your own freedom. And that is why Sometimes we hear all in us when they are speaking to us, they advise us to feed ourselves with the right information, because this is the only thing that can help you emancipate yourself. And until you do that, my brother and sister, it will be very difficult for us to get to our destination. We are the only ones that can set ourselves free. United we stand, divided we fall, and united we keep standing forever and ever. The greatest enemy of the African is mental slavery. So let's decolonize ourselves from mental slavery. Let's keep sharing to educate our brothers and sisters. Together we'll make Africa great for ourselves and the next generations that are going to come. So that's the latest around the world. In Greece.